2015. If you'd like to learn more about the Alumni Council or ways to get involved, I encourage you to find me or any of my colleagues. David's here. Yes, all right, good. But any of us with this little yellow tag as part of our glammed out name tags today for us to tell you how to get involved and participate. So we're really excited to bring you a great, diverse lineup of speakers today. And I think they all really speak to the theme of innovation that is guiding the festival this year. And in particular, I know you're going to enjoy this sure to be engaging session on social innovation at the center. And before we begin, please allow me to introduce our speakers, and I'm blocking you, I'm sorry, whose more detailed bios can be found in your programs. But briefly, let me just introduce Eric Gordon, who is a Senior Research Fellow for Innovation at the Center for the Professional Education of Teachers at TC. He's also the founding director of TC Student Press Initiative and the former director of the New York City Writing Project. Roberta Chang is Senior Director for Education and Policy at TC at the Initiative and the Initiative Director for the Center for the Professional Education of Teachers. She's a former classroom teacher, as is Eric, and she is also a professional coach. So without further ado, I'd love to turn it over to our speakers, so let's give them a warm welcome.
Well, thanks for that introduction. Holler if you can't hear us, but both Eric and I have never been accused of being quiet. So I think that we'll be okay today. As said already, my name is Roberta Chang, and it's just a pleasure to be here today with you, talking a little bit about social innovation and the work that we're doing at the Center for Professional Education of Teachers, or CPET.
Both of us are, we have some history at TC. I took my first class as a master's student here 20 years ago. Met my wife in the first classroom that I sat next to each other first class. It all started from there. Lived in that building right over there, the beautiful Bancroft Hall, while I was doing my doctorate here. And when my daughters were young and I was teaching classes, literally I could wave to them good night at the window of the class and come back to teaching. So I have a lot of history at TC. Really love this institution and more the communities and practices that it enables. So welcome as alumni, as new students. We're really excited to have you here.
So we wanted to start today by talking a little bit about the Center for the Professional Education of Teachers, which is both where Eric and I, where our roots began and where we're working to really grow those roots. The CPET is a legacy center at TC. It's been around for 14 years. And as a part of the center's work, we have been iterating many different projects over the course of the years. These are a few of the projects that have sort of become solidified over the course of 14 years. Some you may recognize and some you may not. But a wide range of projects have been sort of birthed and have grown up in the center. And we're really excited to talk about how these projects are connected to different social innovations and that concept. One of the things that's at the biggest heart of our work is our impact to students. I sometimes say to our coaches, the principal pays the bill, but the students are our clients. The kids are our clients because we're really committed to working with students. And over the course of 14 years, we think that we have supported or impacted about 55,000. No, that's 550,000. I'm English, so I'm very sorry. This many students across New York City, but actually worldwide, because many of our projects cross the borders outside of New York City and actually outside of the United States. As part of our work, we're really working we've worked with over 1,100 schools, thinking about working with teachers, administrators, and students in the processes around resolving problems and looking at problems. So 11,000 schools worldwide, 650 TC students. One of the things that's at the core of the work that we do is not only supporting, bringing sort of TC to the world, but also bringing the world to TC and helping to support our current students and actually former students as they graduate and become professionals in our program through different opportunities, through professional development opportunities, and also workforce opportunities. Here are some of our students. So what is social innovation? And here I want to kick it over to Eric, who can talk a little bit about what's the concept of social innovation and how does it connect with the work we're doing at the center.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, I just want to, that slide with all the student faces is really important to us because what we've been doing, so much of the work at TC is about preparing students and sending them out into the field. What the center has been all about is thinking about what happens here, but also in the field, and keeping kind of one leg out in the field and one leg here, and really connecting, the fact that we've worked with hundreds of doctoral students, sometimes for their entire time. We've taken on fellows as first-year doctoral students that have followed through their complete doctoral work with us, and then even continued to become employees at the center. So this idea of social innovation, at the core, it's about being pro-social. I mean, it's innovation, but it's kind of a no-brainer. It's the idea that we are coming up with new products, processes, solutions to problems in the world. So these aren't just financially motivated problems or products. This is about creating social change. The center has really been about, in many ways, kind of an incubator for ideas. A doctoral student will come in, a master's student will come in with something that's been brewing in their classroom, kind of that slow hunch that they've been working at for years as a classroom teacher, and they'll bring it to the center, and we'll help nurture that and think about what does that mean to take it not just as a classroom teacher, but to take it into a larger arena as a provider of professional development, as someone who's supporting, as a teacher educator. A couple of examples of social innovation. I want to kind of go to the extremes as we think about innovation. Huge problem, right? Clean drinking water. I mean, this doesn't feel so local to us in New York City, but clean drinking water, a massive problem around the world. Social innovation isn't about saying, okay, let's just get cleaner water to people. It's about really thinking about how do people function? What are their daily lives like? How can we not just put in the solution that we think, but by studying these, it's very ethnographic in many ways, by studying these users, understanding their processes, how can we provide new ideas and solutions? One of the things that when people started looking at a lot of places in Africa and India, what they saw was it was not that there wasn't clean drinking water. It was that how far the drinking water was, that, we're talking 3, 4, 7 miles from a village. Water is enormously, enormously heavy, right? So going to a clean water station, and it's usually the women, a mother might have to carry 5 pounds on her head, which is about, or 5 gallons, which is about 42 pounds. The innovation becomes the vessel here. So there are a number of these water wheels. Wheelo is a fantastic example. This can carry up to 12 gallons, and it can actually be pulled with 3 fingers. Very, very versatile. Another very quick one, and this one is one of the, dare I say, funkiest business plans I've ever seen. Foundry 47, their mission is getting guns off the street in Africa. Over 200 million illegal guns in Africa. Foundry 47 is attempting to buy, there are so many buyback plans, but they're very, very costly. Foundry 47 thought about how can they promote this problem? How can they increase social awareness of this problem and at the same time channel funds in to get these guns off the street? They came up with taking guns out of Africa, melting them down, and hiring the top-end jewelry designers in the world to create what is some of the most expensive jewelry now in the world. So something like, $150,000 pair of earrings made out of melted guns. So clearly we're catering to a very particular audience here. This is probably the 1% who is, so But what they've done is they've brought an enormous amount of attention to this problem. Imagine every time someone buys these, how many people they tell the story to. But then every dollar that goes out of this goes into buying more guns out of Africa. So these ideas that businesses, solution strategies are not just financially driven, but they really are about creating social change and impact. And those are at the extremes. This is a little of their mission. Foundry 47 transforms tools of war into objects that inspire imagination and action. Each piece is made from an AK-47 and funds programs to remove such weapons from circulation. I wanted to share those as kind of extreme cases of products. Because social innovation is, yes, products, but it's processes and mindsets. And at the Center for the Professional Education of Teachers, that's what we're really interested in. What does it mean to come together as TC faculty and TC doctoral students from across the college? Because at this point, we've engaged doctoral students from most of the programs across the college to together put their minds together and come up with some of these innovations to solve what really become, what John Kolko would call wicked problems. The problems that are not solvable. I mean, poverty, is it solvable? We could probably debate that. Violence, is it solvable? What we can do, though, is come up with some really innovative ways to address and start to impact those wicked problems. Education, I think, is one of the most wicked problems. So at the center, we've been thinking about how one aspect of entrepreneurial thinking really is about reframing problem as opportunity. How does, when you stumble into a problem that you could very easily say, that's insurmountable, that's a wicked problem. How could we ever end poverty? How could we ever fix schools? And there are a lot of people at the politics level and the policy level who pretend that they can fix schools. But I think on the ground, we know that what we can do is we can impact schools and we can create change, but we can never have, there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all. So this idea is reframing opportunity, reframing problem as opportunity. Famous example. You know what I'm looking at, or what you're looking at here? Anyone? They're nasty. Birds. If anyone goes hiking, these are the things that stick in your socks. And God forbid you get them in your hair, because they're never coming out. Some people put them in tea. It's the burdock flower. My experience has been most intimate with them getting tangled in my dog's fur. And you cannot pull them out. You have to cut them out. So that's a problem, right? So George the Maestro in 1941, he's an engineer. He's walking with his dog over and over. These things are getting stuck in his. He's saying, how does this work? Why is this thing so strong that it sticks like this? What can I learn from it? And he started putting it under a microscope. You got it. One of the most famous patents of the 20th century. Started, and this is classic biomimicry too. This became the patent for Velcro, which is now gone for a number of patents. But the strength of Velcro is based on that problem of that stuff that gets stuck in your hair. This becomes, in some ways, a metaphor for us to extend at CPET. How can we take a problem and start to twist it as opportunity?
What are the educational burrs? That's what we're trying to think about. So there are a lot of them. I bet if we gave you 5 minutes, you could come up with 100 just on your own. Some of the ones that we've seen most frequently and most prevalently, especially in New York City, are things like the implementation of the Common Core standards. For the first time in our nation's history, we've had a set of standards that are adopted almost across the country. And those standards raise the bar, so to speak, for many, many of our schools who are struggling to meet students who are at grade level. And now they have to get students above grade level. That's a real challenge for many of our schools. That's actually connected to policy, the idea of race to the top, which provides a lot of really wonderful funding, but with every carrot is a little bit of a stick, right? And so how our schools are really wrestling with the race to the top expectations and with the policies that are coming down from the city, state, and federal governments, it leaves many of our schools, especially small schools, with a lot of problems that they don't always have the skill sets to solve on their own. That definitely connects with the idea that part of education, whether we like it or not, is actually about politics. And sometimes people put their own political gain in front of the real needs of our students and our teachers. One of those examples is teacher evaluation. One of the most difficult, most complex issues that's facing us today as educators. How do we hold teachers accountable? Should they be reviewable? Well, of course, we all should be reviewable in our work. But what's fair and what's adequate, and how much of my evaluation should be based on my own work versus based on the work of my students? And these are the complex questions that we're wrestling with, not only at the policy level, but then once those policies are set and then they become implemented, now how do we deal with it? And how do we help and support teachers to become the best that they can be as practitioners while wrestling in very tumultuous times of transition? Right now, when I left the classroom, teachers have to do today tons of things that I was never asked to do even just 8 years ago. And so the whole landscape of education in New York City, and New York City as a microcosm of the nation, is changing extremely quickly. And these present real challenges to the everyday lives and workings of schools. And so at CPET, we're trying to think about how do we take these things, these mandates that are coming down about the Common Core and about Regents exams and teacher evaluation, and actually see these problems as challenges, as opportunities. How do we leverage mandates for professional growth? So some of the ways that we do that are thinking about building in inquiry and professional curiosity, making sure that research doesn't end with your master's degree, but actually continues on as a practitioner. Making sure that teachers are engaging in professional collaboration and not just sort of like, well, I close my door and what I do in my classroom is my business, but actually opening their doors, inviting their colleagues in, inviting coaches in and saying, look at what I'm doing and help me understand it better. Help me understand what I could be doing differently to reach that kid in the back row who won't pick his head up. Help me to understand what I can do differently to reach these students who are struggling to learn English. So those professional collaborations become extremely important ways of approaching the challenges that they're facing. We know that we have to use data to inform instruction. In fact, I personally have seen that idea, when teachers learn to actually use that data to inform their instruction, whether it's reading data or attendance data or family data, anecdotal data from other teachers, it transforms the way that they think about teaching and learning. I had a teacher one time say to me after working several years around formative assessments where we did at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, the end of the year, she said, I never learned how to do this when I was in college. No offense to colleges. I never learned how to do this when I was in college. But through the work that we've done as our team, I would never think about teaching my class without doing a periodic assessment now. I wouldn't know what to teach, but now I do. And it's those powerful transformations that inform that teacher's life on that year for those 100 students and beyond and beyond and beyond for the rest of her career. That was 6 years ago. That's 600 students ago. That's powerful. That's exciting. We'll look at the demands of our high-stakes testing, which is something that we're very rooted to, especially in New York City. This is what I wrote my dissertation on, that kids can't graduate from high school unless they pass at least 5 Regents exams, one-day standalone tests. But you don't learn necessarily how to read a test when you're in school. You learn about the history or you learn about the math. But the test as text is a completely different genre. And students need to be prepared in that, and teachers need to be prepared in that. How is my content different than my assessment? So these are some of the ways that we're looking at the challenges that are facing our teachers and our students today, these educational burrs. And these are some of our Velcro patents that we're working on.
Yeah, thank you. So just to remind you, the center has been around for 14 years. At any point, there are between 30 to 50 students who are working here. Right now, we've got just about 40 TC students who are working in some capacity. We've got some full-timers who are on generous fellowships, and then we have some people who are coming in as very part-time collaborators. But over the years, I think it's safe to say that we have dealt with hundreds of burrs, that we've actually created hundreds of projects. Some of these projects have become pretty substantial. So I'm going to tell you one CPET story. Student Press Initiative is now in its 12th or 13th year, not sure. This is a program that grew out of so I was a middle school English teacher for 7 years in New York City. After teaching, before I got my master's, I taught at an independent school in California. Student Press Initiative grew out of the slow hunches, my ways of working within my own classroom that I brought back here as a doctoral student, came to Ruth Vins, this is her center, and we started looking for grant money, looking for ways that we could think of what was happening in my classroom through student publication and reconceive it as professional development, to share it more widely in the field. So I'll back up a little bit. Mid-90s, I'm a middle school teacher, and I have kind of stumbled into, as so many, I think ELA teachers start to understand, the power of audience, how audience transforms student motivation, how students get fired up in ways that they never had once they have an audience for their writing. So we were doing publication in many ways. I mean, from just the simple stapling in the corner to spiral binding. Some of you probably remember these things, right? Cranking, you get the purple on your fingers. But this idea was really starting to change the way and inform the way that I was teaching. So here was one of my challenges, persuasive writing. This is one of hundreds of really cheesy charts that you find on the web. Teach persuasive writing like a sandwich. The one is this. I was struggling with persuasive writing. My kids hated it. I didn't really know how to teach it, and part of it was because the genres of persuasive writing were completely contrived. So they were doing these, 5-paragraph literary essays and trying to persuade. I was the only audience, and they were trying to persuade me of things that they didn't care about. It doesn't seem like a recipe for success. I started looking around me and seeing how hot these best of publications, every publication in New York had their best of, and it was the most popular edition of the year, typically. The Village Voice, Time Out New York.
I never read that one.
I'll just let that linger. That's a Photoshop slide. This does not exist.
Darn it. I really wanted to read that one.
I'm a teacher at the BCS. Forgive me for that poke. But that idea that, I was teaching so many of these genres that were completely contrived when they didn't need to be.
That's right.
As I started looking at the world around me and seeing these models of very real writing that did the same thing but did it with 10 times more authenticity, engagement. So ultimately, we started to publish the students in a series that we called Corrine the Apple, the best of New York. And they were writing about things like the best place to get used video game cartridges, or still-bought cartridges, to the best slice of pizza, the best movie theater to sneak into, started to challenge some of our questions about censorship and things. But it was a very real project where they learned the skills of persuasion, of concision, of research. They'd go out and conduct interviews. So all of the things I was attempting to do in that very failed persuasive essay, I felt like I had stumbled into this so here, genre becomes the opportunity to change. Stumble ahead, 2015, Student Press Initiative, a classroom-based writing program that culminates in student-authored publications and performances. We just recently published our 350th book of classroom writing. All professionally bound, ISBN numbers. Students typically have to write letters to the Library of Congress introducing their publication and sending one down. They write letters to reviewers. But the idea is, how do we take something that is a challenge or a problem, student engagement, student revision, and start to see opportunities to shift that? thousands of students published from a huge range. We've worked with the highest performing schools in New York for 6 years, we did publication projects with incarcerated populations at Rikers Island, really thinking about how could writing for an audience start to shift the way that students even saw the opportunities that might be available to them in school. Hundreds of teacher collaborators. This said something to me early on. The teachers end up as excited about the publication as the students are. We had early on, we had a publication celebration here at the college where we brought 60 11th graders here with 3 of their teachers. One of the teachers, the lead teacher, her mom flew in from Seattle for the student reading, which I thought was so telling. This is a chance not just for students to hand a paper to the teacher marks it and hands it back, but there's a kind of, it's shifting, it's very high stakes. Kids care about it, but it's high stakes as celebration rather than simply evaluation. BERS, problem equal opportunity. I want to give you one more example that becomes really a genre-based example of how we're thinking of shifting this in this particular program. And I should back up and just remind you, SPI is one of hundreds of projects. I mean, this is one of the largest and most substantial, but that have grown out of the center, and it's that idea of students, doctoral students collaborating, incubating, and taking things to the field as research opportunities, but also as pro-social entrepreneurial ventures. So challenge, demands of a region-based curriculum. A couple years into SPI, we started branching out. This isn't just for the English classroom anymore. Working with a chemistry teacher who said there's absolutely no way I could take time out to help have students write for publication. The demands of the regents are way too heavy. So not saying here's our solution, in conversations in this kind of collaborative professional development environment, what grew out of that was the idea, well, how do you know something best? It's when you teach it. So the book that we framed out of that was a chemistry region study guide by kids for kids. So they had to immerse into not only the content, but how do you end up teaching it? How do you craft a study guide for kids? Another challenge came out of it when they were saying that how do we make it most memorable? So the second challenge became about understanding and memorization. The students decided the best way to do that was to create an audio version where some of them rhymed them, some of them set them to music, but we had this, in this New York City public school classroom, we had a little booth built where part of their assignment was to actually create audio tracks that supported this.
Talk a little bit about atomic mass by starting with a little bit about its task. What is atomic mass by definition? The average of an element.
So it's more effective when you really get the full speakers. I forgot we had audio in this, so we plugged it in. Iteration. Over and over, we're coming to the table with some of these SPI projects have brought together as many as 16, 18 collaborators. Each time, we all bring our own perspective. I should back up again. There's a core principle at CPET where we all firmly believe that no one size fits all.
That's right.
That there is not we've never said, here's our curriculum. Here's our SPI curriculum, we're going to take it out to the schools. So in these conversations, solutions get formed, and each time the ideas are iterating. We've started recently to say, at a very core level, what's a book? You know, as things shift so quickly, as so many things move to digital, as books now include so many multimedia elements. And out of that, we've started to form a new project that we're calling Guttenberg. And Guttenberg right now is kind of a pilot project that right now we've got about 6 teachers who come to the table who are interested in this way of working. Guttenberg is about taking public domain texts and then doing multimedia annotation of them and then republishing critical annotations, multimedia annotations of public domain text. So imagine for a second, King Lear. Oh, so I'll tell you this one first. In my teaching of writing course here at the college, where I'm teaching master's students, to really explore in this new way of working, we, rather than just authoring these research projects, they authored multimedia family research projects, and then they had to publish them as fully interactive iBooks. And I'm sorry that it's single platform, but that's where we are right now. Ultimately, we won't be dealing with Apple or PC, and there'll be an open source solution. But so they published these very rich multimedia family research that was very real. This woman chronicled her grandfather, a German immigrant, was actually incarcerated in an internment camp during World War II, which I knew nothing of. I mean, I knew a lot about the Japanese internment. There were actually German internment camps. So she got all of his old letters, did a bunch of research, did family interviews, oral histories, and all of that is laid out in a multimedia iBook that she submitted for the class. So again, a new project that's starting to say, how can we take these burrs and create opportunities? One of the school-based ones, we took the entire text of King Lear, really talented teachers that we're working with at LaGuardia High School, both of them and alum from teaching of English. And they republished King Lear with about 300 multimedia annotations. So there are these hover boxes to see critical text annotations. You can click and up will come the King Lear rock opera. You click somewhere else and you get these dramatic readings. But the idea is building on that idea, iterating on the concept, the principles and practice of publication, but taking it now to other texts, to public domain texts, so that we're republishing our thinking around our readings, our critical readings. Yeah, that's it. I'll read these quickly. And what we're going to do is share these slides with you, because I'm going to be we're jumping through some of them. But these become, I think, some of the really core principles that we're starting to articulate, because part of what we're doing with these projects, too, is researching them. I mean, these aren't just action projects. We're not just going out and doing. These are dissertations. These are articles. These are significant research studies. The principles of this Guttenberg and the annotated Lear project, as we're starting to talk about them, is that students are becoming critical consumers and producers of media. And it's a real shift. If you think of the available media and the design tools that are available to us now. Students are becoming knowledgeable of tools and processes. This is an important one for me. Knowledge and a sense of 21st century copyright clarity. We're sticklers for our APA, works cited pages, for our web. Students should know, what does it mean to remix? What are the implications around fair use? What does it mean when you strip a video from YouTube, cut it up, and republish it? I'm not going to tell them don't break copyright. I'm going to tell them no when you're breaking copyright. Making meaning across media, really this whole idea of transmedia storytelling, which I think is huge for the English classroom. Entrepreneurial thinking, again, curation and remix. And these become some of kind of the core, I think, skills and objectives of this new project.
In addition to the specific projects and iterations that have come out of SPI as one of our founding projects, we're doing a lot of other work across the city. One of the biggest things that we're focused on right now is supporting struggling schools. Here's a map with maybe a fraction. This might be a quarter of the schools that we're actually working with and sort of where they're located. Some of this work looks like, as Eric has described, one-on-one support with a teacher and all of their students around project-based learning, whether that's writing for publication or planning performances or developing other interactive types of projects. But another part of our work is true professional development across schools and also across types of folks within a school. So we're looking at school-embedded coaching across content areas. What started as a primarily literacy-based initiative actually has grown into a cross-content area coaching. We have science coaches, social studies coaches, ELA coaches, math coaches, leadership coaches. And all of these folks are working together with our principles of practice to really help schools to understand the problems that they're facing and then those Velcro moments, right? Looking for opportunities, looking for solutions that are context-based that help them. We're looking at developing leadership and school systems and structures so that our schools can be healthy, functional places where students can learn best. This includes things like classroom visits, where the coach visits teachers to classrooms and then meets with them afterwards to discuss through critical reflection, not feedback, right? Not, here's how you did. Let me tell you on the rubric where you are. But really critical reflection, where the teacher says, how did that go? What did you think about that? Can you give me some advice here? I really got it to work this time. And engaging in that honest, critical feedback has made powerful strides for many teachers. We're looking at professional development workshops. We actually did a series last year of professional development workshops called LIFT. It's Leveraging Instruction for Transformation. And we worked with a network who said to us, can you do some workshops for some of our struggling teachers? And we said, well, yes, of course. Like that's what we love to do. That's where our heart is. What we didn't know is that the network told their schools, all the teachers that you want to just write on the log of assistance for, right, that are kind of like you're looking to get rid of, send them to these workshops because then you can check the box that you gave them PD. And then at the end of the year, when they don't show improvement, you have evidence, right? So we didn't know that. But what happened was, and when we debriefed the session at the end of the workshop series over the summer with the network, they said to us, a lot of our principals couldn't fire people because they made improvements. And they were astonished that these teachers who had struggled for years and years and years came to these workshops once a month. It was not that big of a deal. I mean, it's a big deal, but it wasn't, every day in your classroom. But once a month they came to visit, and they met in communities, and they met with supportive people, and they met with people who could help them understand and reframe the problems that they were having into opportunities for reaching students, for student engagement, for class discussion. We started asking the question, how do you want your classroom to look? Forget about your administrator. How do you want it to look? And with that visioning, they were able to say, well, I want it to look like this. And then we provided tools and resources and time for them to work those things through. And they improved. And their students did better, and they still have their jobs. And that was a big win for us. It's through collaborative planning and curriculum development, these classroom visits, and these workshops. Some of the workshops that we did last year inspired us to say, well, let's take a look at what we're seeing across schools as some of the biggest challenges that schools are facing. And then let's actually preempt and offer to a broader community opportunities to work on those educational Velcros. And so we're actually running 5 professional development workshop series throughout this school year. They typically happen once a month. Some of the workshop series actually includes classroom visits or school visits to the sites where the teachers are participating. We're running one on teacher leadership, writing for publication based out of the premise from SPI, integrating art and music into STEM classes where our teachers are actually engaged in developing science experiments and science projects and inventions, and then developing their own projects to implement into their classroom, and then coming back and talking about here's how it went, here's what went wrong, and here's what went right, and what can I do next time? It's been extremely powerful and impactful for them. We know that education is not just about our academic needs. We tell kids, leave your personal life at the door when you come into my classroom, but who can do that? So we're running an advisory workshop series that focuses on how schools can organize supports for students' social and emotional needs. And we're looking at innovative instruction. It's not all just about supporting, the struggling kids, and it's not all just about how can we pass the test, but rather how can we be innovative in our education? How can we provide innovative instruction that takes kids at all performance levels to the next space? The last thing I want to share is that our work expands beyond the boundaries of schools, and that one of the things that we're very excited about are recent partnerships with other nonprofit organizations who also have shared values and goals around education and supporting students across the country. One of our most recent partnerships is called Public Square, and they're a place-based initiative in Connecticut. If you might not know this, but Connecticut actually sees the widest achievement gap between high-performing and struggling students. And that's something that Public Square is very concerned about. And so they began just this year with a mission around sort of reconciling some of these irreconcilable differences. Reconciling common core standards and high expectations with 21st century skills. How do we take paper and pencil tests when we're preparing for jobs that don't exist yet? Reconciling high-achieving students with struggling students. How can we bridge that gap? And especially reconciling public schools with charter schools, right? These are communities that have a lot in common, but don't ever talk to each other because they're different. And Public Square is all about bringing these folks together within a specific context. And our partnership with them has been in support of their organization, building this network of schools. And it's going to be kicked off at the end of May, actually, with a think tank where they're bringing all their partners together for the first time to really consider what are the key questions, what are the problems that we need to deal with, and how can we work together to deal with those problems? How can we work together to create opportunities out of the problems, to create possibility out of the problems?
So I want to talk about where we are moving forward, but before I do, I just want to kind of back up. I think sometimes because there's so many things going on at this center, it feels like it's this kind of popcorn of activity all over the place. It's important to remind that the reason for that is because what we share as a center are some really core principles of practice, but that we believe that as doctoral students come into this center, that they bring some unique experiences, expertise, and ways of working that we can nurture and grow. So rather than just saying, again, here's what we do a lot of things. And there are a lot of fingers of this center, and those fingers are because of people like Roberta, myself, Deb Soch, all of these people who, the 650 TC students that we've worked with over the years, where we don't just say, here's your job, but we say, what are you bringing? How can we nurture that? So opportunities to participate moving forward. I know some of the people here are new students, and I think the center is a great place to think about participation. Just to remind, we're over 650 TC students that we've worked with. English education, that's where both of us lived for many years. But we brought a lot of core people in from social studies, science, and math. At this point, though, it's tough to find a program at the college that we have not worked with a student from. So we really have, I think our CPET alum have stretched across the college. And the ones that leave us, because actually a number of them never leave, they end up staying and really becoming full-time as CPET grows. The ones who go into the field, many of them, as we've tracked, have been deeply influenced their career paths by their work at CPET. For example, our years of work at Rikers Island, two of the women, they were both master's students who took on year-long internships at Rikers Island, now work in jobs in corrections education, one in Florida, one in St. Louis. So the impact, I like to think, not just what they bring, but what they carry as well. Fellowships. We have a number of fellowships, ways of working. We've been there's some of you who are new have probably looked at the Zankel Fellowship. Student Press Initiative was one of the original organizations that sat down at the table to conceive of those fellowships and then became a recipient of a number of fellows a year. So every year we're very fortunate to host a number of Zankel Fellows. There are a number of other ways that we work with sponsored fellowships as well. Huge range, I'm not going to read through those, but huge range of opportunities for, and it's really important, research and practice, and research in practice. And we've hosted quite a few dissertations over the years in a number of different areas. So, current burrs. And one of the, I think, both of us having done our masters here, a number of people in the room probably did masters, went into the classroom. When I finished my master's and went into the classroom, I felt like I was going in, to a certain degree, naked. You know, I loved my experience at TC, and I felt so nurtured, and I had all these ideas. Went into the classroom, and I was completely overwhelmed. And it was really tough to stay in touch with TC, and I would sometimes come up here, there'd be an event. My first year, I don't think I saw TC at all. My second year, I started coming back, taking advantage of some opportunities. This is an experience that many of us have had, I think, feeling like the support, the encouragement, the learning at the college was so substantial. Going into the field, and this isn't blaming TC, going into the field is really tough.
It's really hard.
First year teaching is one of the most challenging things I've ever done. And I still have dreams about it. So that becomes the burr, right? What we're trying to do is to figure out what does it mean to offer transitional support, really context-specific transitional support, where when graduates from Teachers College go out into the field, when they become teachers, there isn't that feeling of being severed. But there's nurturing support and professional development. So we've created, with the support of the Provost's office, we're just entering our second year of a pilot in what we're calling, the Teachers College New Teacher Network. The idea of the New Teacher Network is that we are providing supports for, ultimately, this is our big audacious goal, ultimately every graduating TC student who goes into the field from all different programs, when they become classroom teachers for the first 3 years of teaching. Really thinking about what does each year of support in the classroom look like. First year is, quite frankly, there's a lot of triage. There's a lot of just kind of support and help them put out fires. Second year, you may be moving a little bit more into seeing from the side, a little bit more peripheral vision as we start to think about how can we support people with some deeper understanding of curriculum and context. Third year, we're starting, hopefully, to think about what does it mean to start giving back, participate in the field, become, even in a third year, you've got some insights to share with new teachers. And ultimately, what we want to do in that third year is offer supported workshops for teachers in becoming really reflective, cooperating teachers. So that then, as they gain the experience, they've come from us, they are familiar with, with Teachers College student and student teaching practices, they become cooperating teachers for our students. So really thinking about how do you start by putting out fires and ultimately do some leadership development. Right now, we're working with this to figure out ways of working. It's a blended network. We've got an online, a cohort of online new students. We're limiting the pilot, we limited to 20 students. We have coaches in content areas, social studies and English ed, who are offering content-specific coaching. They're offering strategies, they're offering resources, conversations, there's a forum. But then there's also some really high-touch in-person. So we've done some evening workshops where we found the most success so far is when we are actually partnering with principals of these new teachers, getting them to give release days and doing full days, Fridays of intensive PD at the college. So bringing people back for maybe 6 Fridays spread out across the year to really help them with what is most important. What are the fires that they need help putting out in their first year? Go Good.
Yeah. So I think
so-
we have a few more. I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, let me just say,
Yep.
so I'll put this up and tell you
Good.
what's there, kind of some other things, but then would love to have some questions too. So follow-up. We have another session this afternoon that will look very different than this one. We wanted to do two. One that was kind of an overview talk, and this afternoon it's all hands-on, it's experience. Another one of our new programs is called Performance at the Center. And it's about embedding performance pedagogies across the curriculum. So this afternoon we have a workshop planned where everybody, just a forewarning, everybody who comes will have you engaged and working with the text. And there's the information there. We also have a conference coming up called Literacy Unbound that brings some really creative, fantastic practitioners from around the country around the idea of multi-modal response to text. It's a 2-day conference, May 1st and 2nd. We've got about a dozen teaching artists. In some ways, I think, as we push at this idea of how do we embed creativity into the classroom with a real sense of intellectual rigor, it will probably feel like a very unconference conference. A lot of workshops, very active, even a couple of performances built in. And then finally, our website. There's a lot of information about the many programs, ways of working. We will print these slides out as PDFs and send them to everybody who signed up, so you have a copy of the slides. Yeah. So I guess we have a few minutes for questions, if people have questions.
Yeah.
This is great work, and I just really appreciate your sharing this so effectively. I'm just curious how the center actually works, and what's the process by which the problems bubble up to problems that you think are worthy of focusing on, and then from there actually to develop the opportunities you're talking about.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the first way that the problems bubble up is because we're out in schools. Myself, I actually am out. I have 4 partnership schools that I've been with for the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm out in schools twice a week, working directly with principals and teachers. And so we're right there when the problem comes up, when the kid throws the desk out the window, or when the principal gets an email from the superintendent that says, "Here's your mid-year evaluation." Right back to me within 48 hours, your response. And we're right there with the principal saying, okay, what are these questions and how are we dealing with them and how can I help you to structure that? So I think that the first way is because we're actually out in the field with the teachers, with the students, and with the administrators on a daily basis. All of our coaches coach in schools. We're all embedded practitioners, and then we come together and talk about our experiences. And we have, through that professional collaboration, are talking about, oh, this came up at my school. Have you seen a new copy of the Regents? Oh, I got the blueprint here. And we're sharing ideas. And from there, new ideas emerge where we're trying to say, how I had this problem. And have you ever experienced that? Well, what did you do? Well, what did you do? Let's get some research on that. Has anybody written about this? What can we learn here? And through that, we're developing promising practices. And we don't like to say best practices, because that's that sort of one-size-fits-all model, right? But promising practices. We've had some luck with this. I think there's something to this. Let's try it. Let's iterate through it, and then come back together and talk about it. So the same processes that we're actually implementing in our schools around inquiry and professional collaboration and communities of practice, we're implementing professionally within our own organization as well. And I think that that's one of the ways that things bubble up. When they're very significant problems, and we can work to find predictable, promising practices, that's when I think we're starting to see more programmatic things like SPI come out, things like SEI come out, things like Project Guttenberg come out, where we're saying, okay, we think that this is a predictable, promising practice, and we want to try to replicate it or take it to a larger scale. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add on too, I think that idea of collaboration that Roberta hit on, can't say enough about that. We have a team of coaches who are out in schools, but are coming back to share both their own expertise, but their own experience in the schools as well. Right. So when one person is starting to get interested with their school in design thinking methods, they bring it back to our coaches meeting and start to teach other people about it. And then that goes out to other schools. And so that's it. It's a pretty informal process in a lot of ways, and I would say organic process. But then certain strands start to work across, but then sometimes become more formal programs at the college.
Yes.
How do you get funding for projects?
We're
Well,
going to pass a
I'm
hat
a card here. We know a lot of our funding actually comes from school-based contracts, where either schools have received grant funding, either through city or state grants, or through private foundation grants. We're always looking for opportunities to fund projects, especially projects that aren't always easily fundable with schools that don't always look pretty on the outside. We're sort of, anywhere we can get it. But, a bulk of our funding right now comes from school-based contracts where schools are saying, we are invested in this process, we need help, and we're willing to pay to play.
Yeah, and then there is a mix. For example, we have a summer fellowship for teachers here, where teachers actually get a stipend to come work with us. It's a fully grant-funded program.
That's right.
And they, again, playing with kind of innovations. This is a very unusual project. We bring 12 teachers as fellows together for 2 weeks to work side by side as creative collaborators with New York City high school students. So they're actually creating something together. We very dramatically strip their titles. You're no longer teacher, you're no longer student. You're players, and you have 2 weeks to create.
I was looking at the publication that you produce.
Yeah.
Is that sold? Or could it be sold, and then that funding or the proceeds be used to?
It's a really good question. What are some of the places that, kind of sustain, more triple bottom line, where are the sustainable, financial streams that are coming in? We have had some publications that certainly, we've sold a number, but we're still talking small press. I think our largest book, run is under 5,000. What's really key, and this, we're still working to convince a lot of people of this. Our model of student publication, and this is a model that kind of goes across all the programs, is not one of only the best. We're using this in many ways, rather than a product, we see this as a tool. It's a curriculum device to motivate. It's a very nice looking one where students work, most of them, harder than they ever have before. But it's still a tool. So, wide audience, it takes a particular kind of teacher who wants a classroom set of these because she believes in accessible models. She believes in students reading students. But that's a great question, where are the potential revenue streams? Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, we're going to have to let Nicole close, but
Nope, that's
can we just say
fine.
thank you?
Of course, yes, thank you, Charlie.